So, good evening everyone. I'm Thomas Dawance. I'm French speaking, so I will speak with my very French accent. I've been presented as being part of the Community Land Trust. I founded with a couple of other colleagues the CLT, and I left the CLT 3 years ago to work on a PhD on related issues on CLTs, and especially how to combine CLTs and cooperative schemes. So I will try to enter in that and explain what are the opportunities or the challenges to make it happen systematically in Brussels context. So that's why I titled my presentation as a revival of affordable, anti-speculative and participatory housing cooperatives in Brussels using the Community Land Trust. So very shortly, I will try just to kind of contextualize a little bit what the issue of CLT and cooperatives may be about. Basically, that's what I summarize as being the paradigm of the commons. The commons being another form of public-private partnership, but more public with the third sectors or the associations or the cooperatives, and see how a public policy can be built in partnership with those stakeholders. And then present quickly the Community Land Trust, and then the Calico Project, which is the only CLT project that include cooperatives. And one of them is Fairground that I will shortly present. And then the housing deal is about how to potentially replicate this kind of CLT plus cooperative schemes in Brussels. So very shortly, it's all about the place of the residents in the production and the management of their habitat, basically. Traditionally, you have individual property ownership and then social housing. Both have limits, like it is individual logic and unreachable for many people, the ownership, and social housing. There's also a very long waiting list. And there's, let's say, less control on the environment for the resident that they could be in cooperatives. So again, like there's a new kind of a third way, which is a kind of new public common governance that is being investigated since the 20 year, more or less. There used to be historical cooperatives in the last century main crisis. And in this main crisis of today, there's a re-emergence of these kind of schemes. And so that's the one we are, of course, dealing with. So that these are very short references on the commons. I won't develop. Mainly, the scheme here presents two very important aspects, I think, for the discussion on these kind of cooperative or CLT schemes. On the horizontal is how commodified or decommodified, meaning anti-speculative, a housing project may be. So if it's strongly commodified, you have commercially rental housing, for instance, or above you have owner-occupied housing, which are not controlled, so they are commodified. And then the other axis is how they are self-organized or autonomous. And of course, if you are in owner-occupied housing, you are autonomous, but you're not collectively autonomous. So if you look up right, there stands the cooperative housing, which combine both anti-speculative schemes and objectives and collective. So this is just to kind of highlight basically what the discussion is about. And it could, of course, be much more developed to think about, because when we think commons and when we think issues of cooperatives, is how decommodified it is or self-organized it is. But is it also financed by the community, the citizens, the foundation, some new banks product? So what is exactly the way it's financed? Is it self-build if it's about the building process, or is it turnkey purchase on the other extreme? Is it for diversified income, or is it strictly affordable housing, or is it strictly for middle class? Is it about community participation or more about resident participation, which would then collectively be another option for l'entre-soi in French, which is kind of collectively protecting the collective interest? Is it a strictly housing project or multi-purpose project? So all those are elements of discussion. I won't enter much in detail, of course. And is it based on a community, a local community, or is it more a community defined by its intentionalities? Okay, so this is just to kind of, so now I shortly present the Community Land Trust that I define as a new public common governance at heart of the social housing policy here in Brussels. So very shortly, for the one who never heard about the Community Land Trust, it's a model that has been first designed and created in 1970 by the cousin of Martin Luther King to provide access to farmland to a community of black people that became for the first time kind of collective owner of their land. And that's in this civil rights movement context that this project has been developed, but it inherited from many other former utopian movement like the socialisme utopique, which basically refers to city gardens and all the tradition of the end of 19th century cooperative movement, and other. I want to develop more. And so there are more than 300 CLTs in the United States, but that's where the project has been set up first. In 2008, the Best Habitat Award, which is a kind of an award given by associated agency to the UN Habitat, gave it to the larger Community Land Trust in United States, and that's how here in Brussels we've heard about it for the first time. In 2016, another CLT in Puerto Rico received it. It's more in the context of global south, informal city. I want to develop. And last December, our Brussels Community Land Trust also received the Best Habitat Award worldwide, and we're very proud of it. And basically, it celebrates the spreading of CLT models in Europe. That's also what is behind the prize for Brussels CLT. So what are the three main settings of the CLT or principles are: first, the idea that the ground should not be appropriated individually and source of speculation. It is something that all humanity or even living beings share on this planet, and like air and water, it should not be at the basis of inequalities. And so the Community Land Trust decide to buy lands and decommodifying it forever, meaning never sell it back to the market. And then it's the community that remains in control of that land. But then on the top of that land, in the context of Brussels CLT, it's about housing, affordable housing production. Then housings are produced on this land, and juridically it's a splitting of the ownership of the land and the buildings. And so thanks to in this case regional foundings in the land, so the region here is really a strong partner. It's a new kind of public policy, investing in the land to make basically the operation cheaper, so that you may sell to the owners of the bricks at a lower price than the market price. So first is division of the ownership of the land that remains in the hand of the Community Land Trust, which is a foundation, and the ownership of the buildings or the apartments that are developed is offered to household with low income. Okay. Then the second is the resale formula, and it's a bit complex. I'll try not to lose myself too much in there, but basically, let's say the people buy at a third of the cost of buying on the market at the market price, and the day they will sell back, we estimate the benefits, the added value, the rise of the price, and the person that sells may take 25% of that benefit with it and with him, and the 75 other percent are deduced in the resale price. So it means that for the people, they are not renting, they are not having a social rent, they are paying back a mortgage, which is more or less corresponding to a social rent. But at the end of the day, when they sell, they receive what the capital they paid on the bank and a part of the benefit. but still it's cheap for the next household that will buy it later. So I hope you more or less understood. If needed, I will explain. But and the third element is how the community land trust itself is governed. So it's supposed to be representing the community or the commons. So who's behind? And it's the board is divided in 3/3. One being the public authority. In this case, every minister of the region decide who's representing them. That's 1/3 public. That's also about 1/3 of the investment is public. Then the second third is the beneficiaries, so the household that bought some apartments on that land. So in comparisons to social housing management, it is quite interesting to notice that here the beneficiaries are in the board taking decisions with the politicians that are represented. And the third is civil society. Basically, in our context, is mainly NGOs or associations, visit ways. The active are in the neighborhoods, concerned about gentrification, about social services to people with low income. So it means that there's no majority there. It's not totally public. It's neither totally private. It's the common is represented by the pillar of inhabitant, politicians or public authorities, and associative associations. Okay. So that's the resale formula. I won't enter in more detail. Just to say that the CLT, in providing those housings to the household with low income, they organize this. This is really about kind of a popular education program as well, because it is about people becoming responsible for the management of their ownership. So there's all kind of training that is and ways to create that people get to know them and each other and decide things together. So there are trainings on how to use the building self and the new technology to like the passive housing, about co-ownership, how to manage and control the co-ownership, how to make decisions, what must be done during the meetings, all these kind of elements. Visits of the neighborhood, so that they are aware of what is happening there and how they can connect with the life of the neighborhood. And there's also individual stewardship of residents during the whole process. We used to organize a very strong participative process on the design self, where we formed a group of future residents, and before launching a public tender to develop the housings, we would have really make a whole process so that they have their word as well in the cahier des charges, in the public tender recommendations. But then we realized that it takes so long to from the day you buy a place and that you have the money to develop something, and the day people may move in, it's about 5, 6, 7 years at least. So that it was demanding too much for those people to be indeed engaged in the process, but for such a long time. So that we, inspired also by what is happening in Zurich, we decided to create what they CLT called Archilab, which are a new way to create a kind of collective that would think together of what would be the best way, what are the recommendations for the design. So instead of having one manager in the team that would decide it by himself for everything, we form a kind of group with figures from the neighborhood, from the municipality, from our members, other experts we may consider interesting to have in the reflection project by project. So again, I don't enter too much in detail, but it's an opportunity to come back once again on the two. If it's about design, so probably the other speaker would speak more on those aspects, but it is to notice that in the region, in terms of social housing or even public housing production today, quite a lot of the new production is based on turnkey, meaning that the developers, private developers, develop the city, and then social housing company, CLTs, or Fonds du Logement, or other public stakeholders directly buy turnkey from the designer. So of course, in terms of, that's represent more or less a third of the production in the last 2 or 3 years, but it seems to be kind of a tendency. On the very extreme opposite, you will have self-build kind of approach, which is also related to some history of the cooperatives, but which is, we are quite far away from that at this stage. But so this is, of course, if the policies are made on turnkey, all the design and build aspects is kind of delegated to the vision of a private developer. So again, I won't develop much myself on the design and build aspect of the Brussels cooperative, as they have been themselves buying turnkey and not really engaged in this issue of the design and build as a cooperative. So just to say that there are 5 projects already with 104 years old at the CLT, and 5 projects are also founded by the region and under process. So quickly, I present the Calico Project, which is one of the latest CLT projects based on using the cooperatives, and it's a very complex project, 34 housing units, intergenerational, with a feminist dimension. On the ground floors, there's also the management of a birth and end-of-life facilities that will be managed by the volunteers living in the project. There's a space open to the neighborhood, and there are 2 housing first projects. The idea is not to present it in full detail, but it is anti-speculative. It thinks about life cycles, gender, intergenerationality, care, and strategies towards the neighborhood. I don't enter too much in detail. These are the productions. I was the researcher in charge of the academic follow-up of the project, and so we published detailed scientific report on the topic. This is where the cooperatives enter in the scheme. I thought I had an animation that brings in the... It's not the case, so it's very complex. So just very shortly what you need to understand, but I think I should wait. I'm going to do it another way. I'm sorry. This is a simplified version of it. I don't need to enter in much detail. No. So what are we talking about in the Calico project, and how does it really use the cooperative? So basically, it's a kind of policy made of 4 layers. First layer is Community Land Trust, or eventually a public authority that would provide public land and remain owner of that public land. That's about the land ownership, okay? So propriété du terrain, which means, or it's designed through founding of the CLT in order for him to buy the land, or it's public land provision. That's also where the public authorities in agreement with the CLT fix the anti-speculative rules that would be then applied to the cooperative. And it also where they set the bonne gouvernance, respecting public procedures, transparency in the whole process, okay? And it is also a way for democratic management of the land, as it is based on the CLT. Then through a biamphitheotic, so that's splitting of land and ground, so and building, the building itself will be bought by a cooperative. And in this Calico project, there are 2 kind of cooperatives basically, so it's a very large discussion as well. One would be more of a resident cooperative, where the residents are in fact middle class, have some money, and would put a third of the price at first to buy the shares, and will convince banks to finance the rest, basically. But they have full control, in a way, of the cooperatives. It's really a resident cooperative. And there's another cooperative, Fairground, that I will shortly present as well, which is more of an investment cooperative, gathering a series of NGOs here working with specific, also with like homeless people, family, monoparental families, or teenagers without les mineurs non accompagnés, all kind of public that those associations are trying to find answer for, and that gather together in the cooperative in order to be able at some point to provide some housing through those cooperatives to their specific public. Okay, and so this is also about democratization of the governance of the cooperative. Basically, one man, one vote. But this is also about public private ethical financing of this. Also, a way to attract the sleeping money of the Belgians into something ethical that would combine to the public policies. And then, and that's quite specific of Brussels, I guess you've heard about the AIS, Agence Immobilière Sociale, which are sociaal verhuurkantors in the Netherlands, and that are taking into management private units in the city, and thanks to funding from the region, offer a social renting price to people in need in those private units for a couple of years. And in this case, the cooperatives, as owner of the brick, have an agreement with the Agence Immobilière Sociale in order for them to intervene in the renting price and make it affordable. So that's quite important in my view in terms of housing policies, that we reach affordability. Most of the time, cooperatives or habitat groupé, co-housing, are restricted to very traditional co-ownership types and remain in the hands of the one that have enough money and time and knowledge to design all this. And most of the time, it's restricted to the middle class. So here, it is really finding a way to use the cooperatives to reach affordability into an anti-speculative, permanently affordable and schemes. So with the use of the social verhuurkantoor, and this in the Calico project, and that's a little bit complex, but is not strictly the cooperatives that come with the co-housing vision. There are other associations, again, ASBL, Visit Ways, that are engaged in the process, and the allocation of the units is delegated from the social verhuurkantoor, from the AIS, to those associations, because they work with specific objectives. So they are in charge, not the cooperative. But that's a little bit complex. But this is really entering into the detail on how you build a co-housing vision in a public founded scheme. So I won't enter, but that's so again for what is the associations that are partner. It's about allocation of the housings, stewardship of the residents, strategies of social cohesion and projects with the neighborhood. Okay, so just one of those cooperatives that has been created in the project. Two cooperatives has been created from scratch in the context of that European project of the CLTB. And so one is the one that I mentioned as being investment cooperative, is Fairground. Here you have logos of the main partners. The idea is to provide housing for homeless and other low incomes, and fight against speculation. And that's, in fact, in the case of the Calico project, guaranteed by the CLT and the public funding in the CLT. So they also have I won't enter in much detail in there neither, but they have all reflection on governance, like who is in the board, what is the role of the founders. They have a network of associations. They have an assembly engaging also the beneficiaries. They already have some 13 apartments founded in 1 year, and 2 associative spaces. This is a picture of how they are founded. 24 is share parts. Banks is also 25%, and the rest are different products of ethical financing. And I'm almost done, and thanks for the. Just wanted now to present what is called the housing deal. That is a project developed by an association here in Brussels that is called SohoNet, which is a platform of 54 members that include the CLT, Fairground, and other cooperatives and other associations, other social verhuurkantors, AIS. And what they are trying to do with that housing deal, what the housing deal is about replicating that scheme I presented to you, so that one, trying to convince the public authority to be able to provide foundings to CLTs, not only for co-ownership, as I presented at the first as the core business of the CLT, but for these kind of new schemes where the public authority would then finance the CLT same way, but in order for cooperatives to buy the all units, the lots of units, and develop this kind of schemes. And so they've been, the idea there is to really support more structurally an anti-speculative, functionally and socially mixed community-led housing project. So are we about to have the revival of cooperatives here in Brussels? Basically, if you do not have a public intervention, I'm not saying that it is only through that scheme of CLT with cooperatives that it may occur, but if you don't have any support from the state, it's almost impossible today for private cooperatives to offer social prices, and especially at long term. So basically it's really about designing this kind of anti-speculative, and also in the context of a new public common kind of governance, really design how the roles and limits and responsibilities of all the stakeholders I mentioned. And the State Secretary of Housing founded the housing deal of the SohoNet, a study that it has not really been published yet, but the results are here. And very shortly, the question was, is it attractive for investors to invest in those cooperatives? Because if there's no one to invest in Fairground or others, then they won't develop cooperative schemes. And the answer is, today you may provide 4% of interest rate of benefits to the investor. So on that aspect, the scheme of CLT, cooperatives, and social verhuurkantors is attractive for the cooperatives. But then for the public financing, is it cheaper or more expensive to produce social housings in totally publicly? And it appears that at the latest, taking all the being prudent, it is at least 30% cheaper than to buy turnkey and directly enter it in social housing stock. So it means that it is economically, not speaking about the governance aspects, but strictly economically speaking, it is cheaper to found CLTs and social verhuurkantors for ages than it is to really enter in public housing. So it has also a positive impact on the debt, at regional debt, but I won't enter. I'm really finished there. 25 seconds. So now basically the housing deal has kind of provide the result that it is efficient for the public investment and feasible for the investors, so that there is some attractivity to build those cooperatives. So the next steps is really defining a larger governance that would allow this kind of schemes to be scaled up at regional level, and also at European levels, because there are similar kind of approaches happening, especially in Barcelona, where the metropole there has set a whole system of providing public lands for cooperatives. So I don't enter in much detail there, but there's a building of a CLT network at European level, and it may be that those schemes, CLT plus cooperative, would be basically a way to envision the development of future CLT perspective in Europe. Thanks for your attention.